project where you had the unreinforced concrete in the cells of the sand filtration plant. And there are all sorts of questions about whether it could be structurally recreated or what would happen if you tried to reinforce it in a variety of ways. And at the mayor's agent hearing, it was concluded that any effort to try to stabilize them and any intervention would result in its total loss. And you wouldn't have a preservation project anymore. It would be new construction. And we're faced with a similar situation here. So based on that and what you'll hear from our structural engineers and from Mr. Carter, we request that you adopt the recommendation contained in the staff report. And we note that there is a letter from ANC2C in support of declassifying this and changing it to a non-contributing building. And we hope you afford it the great weight to which it's entitled. With that, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Carter.
Good morning, members of the board. Doug Carter here, Davis Carter Scott Architects. And so I will say, just by way of introduction, Bob Davis and I started our firm in 1968, and two of our first projects were in the district. In 1969, one of which is now the Wharf, but we built the Gangplank restaurant and marina there, going back that far. So we've since then done many projects in the district. We've got approximately 9 million square feet of product, which is both office building, residential buildings, a lot of interiors, and we've even done some historic preservation work with the board and working with Mr. Steve Colcott. So I think my job is really fairly simple here. I just wanted to illustrate where the site is, and I think that the red outlined area shows you that we've got High Street to the north, we've got H Street to the south, 7th to the west, 6th to the east, and so this warehouse under discussion is right in the middle. There is an east-west alley that has access both to High Street and to H Street, and the warehouse sits right on that. So next slide, please. This is then a close-up, and so I don't think there can be any doubt about the commitment from Monument to preserve as much of the fabric in this block as possible. What we are doing is retaining all of the townhouses that you see towards the top of the screen on High Street. There is a north-south alley that you see illustrated there. And to the west of that, we will have a separate, we call it the West Tower. The townhouses will be retained and renovated, which is, in a couple of instances, quite an interesting, challenging proposition. And then to the south, on the east-west alley, we're hoping we can build a 7-story multifamily building. And so the warehouse, as you can see from this illustration, sits squarely in the middle of that. And it creates, obviously, the challenges that we have just been discussing. So next slide, please. And so here are just a couple of shots of that warehouse. The east-west alley is 30 feet wide. And so literally, the warehouse really can't be seen from anywhere except the alley. And so its deteriorated condition really is stopping us from doing the anticipated multifamily building. We are committed to preservation. And so in the photograph on the right, you see the 2-story buildings extending to the west from the warehouse. And those are part of the preservation effort, as well as the townhouses on High Street. And so next slide, please. You can see this is a current photograph of those townhouses on High Street. And by the time we're finished with the project, those will be restored to their original and hopefully pristine condition and used as multifamily apartments. And so next slide, please, is just simply showing you, this is an elevation of those townhouses. And this is part of the rehabilitation condition that we will be facing. And so, Carolyn, I think that SK&A can really address the current issue. And so I hand it back to you.
Okay, Mr. Priswara?
Hi, my name is Jack Priswara. I'm with SK&A Structural Engineers. The structural evaluation of this building was completed by Horace Willis and myself. Horace is a structural engineer with 38 years of experience in the DC market, exclusively in repair and restoration. He has actually completed a couple of historic preservation projects in the near neighborhood, in particular at the original Spy Museum, as well as at Hotel Monaco, but both only a few blocks away. I have 11 years of experience, also exclusively in repair and restoration. I've completed numerous structural evaluations, as well as evaluations of historic buildings. And of particular note, I've completed a historic preservation of the Candler Building on the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, a building that was built in 1908. I am also a board member on the Baltimore Washington chapter of the International Concrete Repair Institute. We evaluated this existing warehouse building for its structural capacity. The building is a reinforced concrete frame structure with terracotta infill walls. The reinforced concrete structure is exposed on the east and west elevations so that the vertical columns and spandrel beams are visible from the alley in the sides of the building. We found numerous cases on the existing spandrel beams and the vertical columns of corrosion-related deterioration, with a lot of locations where the actual rebar in the columns and spandrel beams was visible due to spalling and delamination of the concrete frame. Additionally, from ground level, we performed sounding survey of the reinforced concrete framing, and beyond what is visible, we also detected hollow sounds on the concrete frame, which is indicative of additional ongoing corrosion and subsequent delamination. For our evaluation, we applied Chapter 4 of the 2015 International Existing Building Code, which was adopted by the 2017 DC Construction Code. Chapter 4, the Chapter 2 defines substantial structural damage as meaning one of two criterias: a vertical criteria that has damage to members that impact 30% of the floor area with at least a 20% reduction in overall load carrying capacity. We did determine that this building does in fact meet that criteria due to the numerous delamination and spalls observed at the perimeter building columns. Additionally, the horizontal definition for substantial structural damage involves the vertical elements of a lateral load carrying capacity with at least a 33% reduction in capacity. Again, we found that this building does meet that threshold as well, due to the extensive damage that we observed. Go to the next slide. We can observe some pictures. This is an example of one of the locations of damage. As you can see, the visible rebar framing in the reinforced concrete column, the significant corrosion of the reinforcing bars. The rebar disintegrates to touch at several locations. The methodology of which to repair these types of reinforced concrete columns would be to remove all sound and unsound concrete to access the existing reinforcing bars that are experiencing corrosion, to supplement or fully replace the reinforcing bars before putting concrete back to restore the structural capacity. Given the extent of the damage here, the amount of concrete that would need to be removed to implement repairs would be a substantial portion of the existing structural framing. And by the time repairs would be complete, the majority of the historic building structural framing would be completely removed and replaced. Furthermore, in repairing buildings, per the International Existing Building Code, we have to, any building means substantial structural damage has to be brought up to current codes for both lateral and vertical loading. There would be a substantial retrofit to this building that would be required to bring it up to current lateral resisting capacity for earthquake and for wind resistance. The building built in 1922 falls well short of existing capacity in that regard. We can continue to the next slide. Again, here's further evidence of deterioration. As you can see, it's quite extensive. The deterioration extends almost the whole height of the building, especially on the columns, which are the major vertical carrying capacity of the building. We can keep going to the next slide. Again, here's other locations with rebar fully exposed, concrete spalled, so much so that we, are undercutting the existing rebar and it's not engaged with the rest of the concrete. And there's existing stirrups that are disintegrated to such an extent that they're almost down to a pencil, as opposed to being original 3/8 to a 1/2 inch, what their original size was. Based on these existing conditions, we recommend that this building be demolished rather than preserved. The repairs required in order to restore the capacity of the building and to bring it up to current code would be more than substantial, well beyond a simple repair and restoration project.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have or any questions that come up in testimony on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members have any questions?
I do, Chair Heath. Thank you. I have a question of Mr. Pizzara relative to your testimony about the repairs. Certainly, that may not be a simple or easy repair project, but what would be required in order to repair the conditions you found? Not only the exposed rebar, which is fairly common and not unusual, but also, as you've testified, there's structural delamination of the concrete, of the steel within the concrete columns as well, I think, as I understand from reading your report. Would you be doing epoxy injection to re-adhere these? Would it require removal of the concrete to put in new concrete? What would be the range of repairs that would be required in order to have this building be structurally solid? And then I recognize the seismic accommodations would be an additional effort on top of that.
Yeah, so let's just start by restoring the building to its original capacity.
Yep.
The typical methodology in reinforced concrete is to remove all unsound concrete, of which there's a substantial amount here, as well as additional sound concrete to fully expose existing reinforcing bars that are experiencing active corrosion. In a lot of cases in this building, that's already been done for us because the concrete's spalled and laminated and gone. But it also requires substantial more concrete demolition in order to expose more reinforcing bars. Reinforcing bars with greater than 20% section loss, of which there are several visible bars exceeding that amount, need to be replaced or significantly supplemented. Once that occurs, it followed by restoration of the concrete material with new modern high strength concrete. The extent of demolition that would be required to repair these columns would be performing demolition on significant amount of the cross section of the column, so much so that we're almost going to be left with building a new column rather than restoring the existing column. That's just to restore the building to its original capacity. Then there's the added component to bring it up to current seismic capacity. These columns in particular are severely lacking in stirrups for existing seismic loading. And then the lateral load resisting system for wind loading needs to be upgraded as well with substantial more lateral members in the building framing in order to resist loads. The majority of the structure then at this point would be entirely new framing. And as such, we're not maintaining much of the original framing. We're essentially building a new building at this point.
Thank you. And did you also find the similar situation in of delamination in the steel that in the floor slabs as well, as you found in these columns that you're showing us images of?
Yes, there is active corrosion going on the floor slabs in the interior. There is also stress cracking through the floor slabs. We focused on the columns because the columns are the major vertical load carrying element of the building framing, require the most substantial repairs, but there would also be substantial repairs needed on the floor slabs as well, involving replacement of significant sections of the floor slabs.
Was your firm also involved in the previous, when we heard this in, I forget when Bill said it was, or when Steve said it was, were you involved in the previous evaluation?
We have
of this
involvement dating back to 2014, yes.
2014. And how much worse would you say it is now than it was in 2014? As it, sometimes these buildings can accelerate pretty rapidly once the steel gets exposed, right? The water has a pathway in and it finds a way to keep going and reaching further into the building, especially if the rebar from the floor is tied into the columns. But how rapidly have you found this to be deteriorating from when you looked at it 10 years ago?
The damage 10 years ago in 2014 was already substantial. So, it's difficult to put a percent basis on the amount of increased deterioration. We would have had these same recommendations that we have right now in 2014 as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I had a question, Chair Heath. The applicant talked a little bit about the project that's been proposed. I wonder, since in looking at this building, it seems really kind of notched into this site. So I guess my question is, what consideration has been given to evaluating the structural integrity of the adjacent buildings, especially the adjacent alley buildings, and what sort of protection might be necessary to ensure the structural integrity of those, assuming this building does get removed in future?
Yeah, so we've also evaluated all of the other buildings on the property. This building's unique in the sense that it's a reinforced concrete frame structure. The rest of the buildings, most of which date pre-1900, are load-bearing brick masonry and wood frame construction. Those buildings require stabilization of the existing masonry load-bearing walls, as well as supplementation and replacement of some of the interior wood framing. There would be shoring, pinning of existing facades required, during demolition and restoration process. But the extent to which repairs are possible on a load-bearing masonry building with wood framing is much easier than a reinforced concrete building like this one.
Okay, great, thank you. So I guess in your assessment, this building could be removed without compromising the structural integrity of those adjacent buildings?
Correct. If appropriate stabilization steps are taken to those buildings. Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I should note too, we have a couple more photos if we go another slide or two on some of the other damage. There are questions. Again, there's more damage to a column here as it abuts one of the adjacent brick frame buildings or load-bearing brick buildings, and then some interior photos as well on the next slide. Here's an interior joist that's cracking. a spandrel beam at a window header. You can see a through thickness crack through the floor slab as well in the photo on the right. So definitely extensive concrete damage in this building.
Thank you.
All right. We have one person who's registered to speak on this application this morning. That's Rebecca Miller. And I do think I saw her on.
Good morning, Chair Heath.
Good morning.
And good morning to members of the board. My name is Rebecca Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment on the applicant's request to recategorize 616R I Street as a non-contributing building in the downtown historic district. DCPL, known at that time as Don't Tear It Down, surveyed and documented downtown beginning in the late 1970s, resulting in the eventual designation of the downtown HD. The tall warehouse building at the rear of 616I was built in 1921 for the Craig Express and Transfer Company, previously located at 1226 H Street Northwest. The Craigs moved to the I Street location around that time and built the rear storage warehouse was built. Joseph Craig was a native Washingtonian and the president of that company. And the company was founded by his father, Gottfried Krieg, around 1875, and the warehouse was designed by Julius Weinig, a German immigrant who designed apartment buildings, commercial buildings, residences, and an automobile showroom during the years of 1899 to 1938. DCPL's leadership comprises of community activists, architects, architectural historians, contractors, and structural engineers, all having exceptional background in the preservation and adaptive reuse of historic buildings and structures across the city. DCPL generally finds the SK&A report to be very heavy-handed, as the photos indicate that the deterioration of the concrete structure appears to be localized, and the extent of the reinforcing corrosion does not appear to be as significant as the report indicates. We've certainly seen buildings repaired on many concrete buildings that were in far worse conditions. Moreover, repairs to a concrete structure of this nature are quite common and easily executed by a concrete repair contractor. But of course, this would all have to be budgeted for in the overall project. Some common localized repairs could include any of the combination of the following: removal of spalled concrete, cleaning and coating of corroded reinforcing and concrete patching, localized concrete repairs and addition of carbon fiber strengthening at affected areas, installation of supplemental framing below slabs and beams to resupport damaged areas. DCPL believes that the building still retains its integrity required to continue its characterization as contributing building to the historic district. Utilitarian buildings play a large role in the public's understanding of the development of this city. So just because it's visually less appealing than other buildings we have in the district, it does not make it any less significant under the DC preservation law, which only differentiates buildings between contributing to a district or an individual landmark. DCPL also believes that this building can be upgraded and adaptively reused to continue contributing to the historic district. The HPRB has discussed previously the need to be consistent in the board's decisions and not overruling past board's decisions. In just the past decade, several buildings have not been recategorized due to their structural failures, including this building in 2014. None of those buildings could be occupied in their current state and yet still retained integrity to still contribute to their respective districts. We'd ask that you continue this consistency. DCPL looks forward to working with the applicant as they continue their development of this very important project in the downtown district and as it brings new residents downtown. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Does anyone have questions for her?
Yeah, I have one question. Ms. Miller, good morning. You mentioned SK&A's report to be, quote, heavy-handed. Have you all had a structural engineer look at their report and do an assessment of their report?
Yes, Matt Daw, who is a structural engineer formerly, is now retired, and yes, he evaluated it along with the architects and others on our project review committee.
And did he write a report on his findings?
He didn't write an actual report. He gave these talking points.
Okay, so he hasn't specifically refuted, he just gave you general talking points, or he's specifically taken exception with some of the aspects of SK&A's report?
He read the report that was sent to us by Monument Realty, and this was the response.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to the testimony?
I'd like to just make one comment on what was said there is the nature of the damage being categorized as localized. I think some of the photos we have clearly demonstrate delamination, exposed rebar, spalling, pretty much on the full height of the building. In our assessment, it's greater than 50% of the reinforced concrete column area that are exposed have existing damage. In our view, that's well beyond localized. So that's just a quick comment that I have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? If not, are board members ready to deliberate? If so, I'll ask the board members turn on your cameras.
Chair Heath, this is Gretchen. I had one question that I briefly wanted to ask of Ms. Miller, if that's all right. I forgot. I wondered if the structural engineer, if Matt Dahl was able to be on site, or if his reaction and comments were based on the documentation and report that was provided.
Just based on the documentation that was provided. And this
Okay,
was a discussion amongst our project review committee as well.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Makes sense. Okay.
So, sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. It's good to clarify. All right. Would anyone like to start the discussion?
I support the staff report.
Okay. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add that differs from the staff report?
Yeah, I don't see any reason to change the position that we had from our previous discussion. That's why I asked about the amount of additional deterioration. One, because I'm wondering if there were significant additional deterioration, why we wouldn't be having a conversation about demolition by neglect. But since there's not, and this deterioration has not dramatically increased, I don't see any reason to change the position that we previously had taken.
I mean, it would, without having seen the extent of damage 10 years ago, it seems without a doubt it would continue, without protecting the building, it would have continued to deteriorate substantially more over 10 years. There's no way it could be in the same condition.
No, but not substantially. It's not substantially worse than it was 10 years ago.
You wouldn't think so?
Well, that's why I asked the structural engineer, and he said he provided us that information.
Gretchen, I just want to clarify that when the board considered the contributing versus non-contributing status of the building back in 2014 or 15, it was solely based on whether or not the building was significant. The board did not consider the structural engineer's report. That was presented to the mayor's agent, and I believe it may have been part of the record for HPP, but I'm not sure. But that was not the argument that the applicants were putting forth. They were solely putting forth an argument that it should be deemed non-contributing based on not being significant. And so that was the nature of the board's discussion and the determination. This argument is a different argument, which is solely based on its integrity.
Okay. So we were not evaluating the structural integrity at that time.
Correct.
I don't know straight off of my memory, but 10 years ago. And what I've been able to find in the record, I'm sorry that I did not watch the video of the testimony. but I read the report that was issued, Steve, that you sent 10 years ago, that's on record.
Right. And
But I also remember.
it didn't, I mean, it mentioned that the building was deteriorated, but it didn't reference a structural engineer's report or get into the integrity question. It was merely that the building still had its appearance, which I think one could argue it still does today. But when looking at it more specifically, I think the structural integrity of the building, on which we have a lot more information, is the additional information that's provided today.
Madam Chair, I'm
Right.
sorry to interrupt because I know you're in deliberations, but just as a point of clarification, I did go back and listen to the entirety of the 2014 discussion before HPRB, and Ann Adams was the expert witness for Monument at that time, and she explicitly stated on the record that Monument was not questioning the integrity of the building.
Okay. Okay. Anyone have other thoughts? I was struck by the comment from SK&A about the fact that he would have determined this building to have been structurally compromised 10 years ago. So hearing that that was not a part of the argument then makes that comment make a little bit more sense as to why it wasn't a consideration at that time. But I am also more supportive of the staff report. Cases like this are always unfortunate. Really wish there was a better way to enforce protection of historic structures so that we don't get to this point, but we are here. So unless anyone has, I'm not sure whose background noise that is.
Somebody needs to mute.
If someone could mute. Thank you. So unless anyone has any other comments they'd like to share with the board or persuasive arguments for differing with the staff report.
I mean, I don't really have any grounds. I'm sorry, Chair. I don't really have any grounds to differ from the staff report because I'm not a structural engineer, right? And I don't have the same access to the building, and I'm not professionally hired to evaluate it or bring a structural engineer who might also have an opportunity to review, who has a significant, equal amount of experience with concrete reinforced buildings. But I would say that for my being on the site 10 years ago, and then my being on the site recently when I knew this case was coming, I haven't noticed a dramatic difference in the building, deterioration, and the kind of repairs that were discussed in the SKA report are very common to these kind of buildings. Granted, they are significant, and there is a good amount of work that needs to be invested in this building. And I guess what's being provided by staff is that this building isn't important enough because it's a utilitarian building and not unique in terms of its style, and should be therefore demolished because it has this investment that's required now because of lack of continued maintenance and deterioration on the building.
Okay.
I think for that, I don't agree with the staff report, but
Okay.
I may be the only one. So.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion and call for a vote, and we can see where we stand as a board. So I will make a motion to support the staff report and ask for a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Matt. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and anyone opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Okay, so we have 4 votes in support. Board Member Heath, Board Member Miller, Board Member Marzella, and Board Member Bell in support, and 2 votes in opposition, Board Member Failer and Board Member Auerbach. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. So the motion carries. Just want to make sure we have that correct on the record, and that I captured everybody's position. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. We are ready for our next case in the Capitol Hill Historic District, Brent Elementary School. Would staff like to make your presentation?
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is Andrew Lewis with the Historic Preservation Office. To briefly introduce this case, DC Public Schools and the District Department of General Services are proposing to raise the existing Brent Elementary School at 301 North Carolina Avenue Southeast and replace it with a new building on the same site in the Capitol Hill Historic District. The existing school building, which was constructed in 1968, falls outside the period of significance for the historic district and is not considered individually eligible for the DC Inventory of Historic Sites or the National Register of Historic Places. So HPO has no concerns with the proposed raise and has not received any expressions of concern from any other party. The new building, which was designed by DLR Group Architects and Smoot Construction, will be somewhat larger than the existing school, but will respond more appropriately to the context in terms of massing by extending the face of the building to the north and west, so it will align with the historic street walls and reinforce L'Enfant view corridors along principal streets. As described in the staff report, the remaining details of the concept, which have gone through multiple iterations, can perhaps best be characterized as subtly differentiated from the historic context rather than directly imitative. But HPO recommends that the board find the concept compatible with the historic district, request any comments or suggestions that may improve the compatibility of the design, including using a different color for the signage to increase its legibility and opting against the bookend alternative that was developed for consideration, and also recommends that all remaining design review be delegated to HPO. And with that, I will defer to the project team unless anyone has any questions of me.
Yeah, Chair Heath, I had a question. Hey, Andrew. So I noted in the application there was a comment about archaeology, and that being kind of the primary preservation concern. I wonder if it's appropriate for staff to speak to this, if you could, or happy to defer that to the applicant if that's a more appropriate question for them.
I will have to look into it. I don't recall there being any archaeological concerns. This project actually was presented by DCPS and DGS several years ago, but then was put on hold. So if I recall correctly, the archaeological considerations were, our investigations were conducted some time ago, but I can look into it and as the presentation is being made and get back to you, hopefully with some more specific information if possible. If not, I will check with Ruth Tricoli, our archaeologist, and I'm sure she'll be happy to provide information.
Okay, yeah, I'm just curious just because it called that out specifically. So thank you.
I'm sorry, but in what case was archaeology called out?
Yeah, so reading from the narrative description on the application, it says, as a replacement building project, site archaeology will be the predominant preservation activity expected. And the way that's worded suggests to me that there is some archaeology
Right.
on the site that will be
Okay,
preserved.
I'm sorry, that was in the application. Okay, I don't recall that, but let me look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I will proceed. My name is Camilo Behrman. I am the regional sector leader for our K-12 practice at DLR Group. DLR Group is an integrated design firm serving the needs of clients nationally for learning environments. We've worked on many important buildings in the district, including Maury Elementary School, Blue High School, and Smothers Elementary School. Just proud and honored to be part of this discussion about Brent Elementary School. Joining me today is Elise Robinson, principal in charge, and also May St. Nguyen, who is our project architect. And if appropriate, they may help me fill in some of the details and answer questions should they come up. Next slide, please. Brent Elementary Replacement School. It will be about a 95,000 square foot building, which, as was mentioned, is slightly larger than the existing building. You see its position here in the red geometric shape in the middle of the slide, situated along a Grand Avenue, if you will, along North Carolina Avenue and 3rd Street, adjacent to Folger Park and Providence Park, which the school uses as at times as extension of their play space and to connect with nature. Not far from the school is Eastern Market on the eastern side of its catchment area, and you see the U.S. Capitol on the northwest side. Next slide, please. As we looked at the zoning and land use, we understood that this building should essentially be a 3-story building, and there is some mechanical equipment on the roof, which is not as large as the zone indicated in this massing model. And that we did look at several positions for the school, but the preferred opportunity here was to line the the building along the street walls to reinforce the avenue arrangement of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. Another factor that the team has been dealing with is the proximity to the WMATA tunnel, which you see dashed on the upper part of this graphic. The second line down, which has got a note which is called Zone of Influence 23 feet minimum depth. What that is indicating is an offset from the edge of the WMATA tunnel, and that offset you can see veers into the black line, which is the property line. So studies have looked at how we can build on the property without having to make footings that are excessively deep. Previous studies looked at pulling the building back away from following the street line, if you will, not being on the property, but at least being parallel to the street to frame the edge. However, the way we're dealing with this is to indeed keep the building that you see, the part of the building that you see, aligned with the street. It's the basement of the building that will be pulled back in, and the first floor will be cantilevered, but you don't see the cantilever because it is essentially below grade. Therefore, allowing us to keep our footings outside of the zone of influence, and also minimizing the cost of having to do excessively deep footings. Next. As we looked at the site, it is a mix of public parks on the west side or the left of the site and other institutional buildings. On the top right corner of the slide, you see the church that's at the corner of North Carolina and 4th Street. As we look away from the site, this slide also gives you a good sense of that 1968 building and how that building is pulled back from the edges of North Carolina. It's sort of more geometrically aligned to the secondary streets, 4th Street, E Street, which is on the south end of the site. This is looking inward to the site generally. The next slide, please, shows a little bit more of the site details where you can see not only the detailing of the existing building, but above center, you'll notice that there is a retaining wall between the edge of our site and the institution, the church just to the east of our site. And that retaining wall runs all the way north-south from North Carolina down towards D Street. On the far right, bottom right of this slide, you'll see the retaining wall coming out towards D Street, and the fact that the neighboring residences are, many of them are built 3 or 4 feet above street level, sort of on a landscaping plinth. if you'll pardon the expression. So, next slide, please. The nature of the architecture of the neighborhood is well known. Capitol row houses, in addition to some larger apartment buildings, condo buildings, and parks and institutional buildings. We did take our cue from the townhouses in a way that was not mimetic. We did look at some use of bays, but I think the preference was to allow that the classrooms not be articulated into bays, which allows us to create more of a larger window rhythm, which will show you. The design, however, we do feel that there's a lot of textural qualities to a larger span of buildings as they're put together. And that is something that is informing the idea of the texture on the design, which we'll show you soon. Next slide, please. Just as a way of further clarifying the location of the existing building, which will be removed and replaced. Please note on the bottom, and you can see it here too, that's fine. On the bottom right of the southeast side of the site, there's an existing curb cut, which we will reuse and repurpose for more site access and parking. Next slide, please. So a site plan shows the building that is along North Carolina Avenue, turns the corner onto 3rd Street so that the building faces both North Carolina, looking northwest towards the Capitol, and also looking west towards Folger Park. What that does, in addition to framing the street edge, helps to create a more semi-enclosed play area on the southeast side of the building. And that play area is a mixture of obviously hardtop for court games and also playgrounds. On the bottom right, you'll see in a gray zone and dashed arrows, the service zone, and that service zone would have the trash and recycling, also the ability for service to drop off materials to the school. There will be screening as part of that service zone. Next slide, please. The grading plan may be a little bit difficult to read here, but essentially the intent is to, on the north side of the site along Carolina Avenue, is to develop the area between the building and the sidewalk to take advantage of some outdoor instructional space that would be, again, semi-protected through the use of landscaping and fences, some play space so that some of the younger students who are on the first floor could have the smaller sort of tot lot playgrounds. And on the northwest corner, there would be a plaza that would be the main gathering place for students as they arrive and depart at the beginning and the end of the day. Next slide, please. So as we start to look at the building in 3 dimensions, here you can see the entry on the front and the idea that there's a gathering plaza, there's perimeter fencing. In blue, you can start to see some of the play areas outside of the building, marked both on the North Carolina side and on that semi-protected playground side on the southeast side of the building. Also, you'll notice the service zone with the dashed arrow there showing access to that service zone from that existing curb cut. You'll also start to notice a shaping of the building on the corner, both on the outside corner, if you will, on the streets, and the inside corner for the playground. And we'll talk more about how that shaping of the building is reflective of the program on the inside. Next. Thank you. So just a section through the building shows that one of the ways that we are keeping the building to 3 stories so that it can be better integrated into the massing of the overall neighborhood is we are sinking the gymnasium down into the basement level. Along with other program in the basement level, there's a music room, which would then be close to the stage, but then also a lot of mechanical spaces. So there are mechanical spaces and but still some equipment on the roof. This allows us to make sure that we're keeping our building at 40 feet. Next slide, please. In general, the material palette that we're looking at are materials that are appropriate for institutional use, appropriate for DCPS and DGS. The majority of the palette includes multiple shades and multiple textures of an ultra high performing concrete rain screen panel. I'll just say that we're looking at a product like Tactile as a basis of design, if that helps to give you a visual picture of what that material will be. We're looking at larger format panels and continuing to investigate the exact widths and heights of those. In addition to those, that rain screen, which would be the majority of the classroom facades, we're looking at ACM or aluminum composite material panels, especially in areas where we are celebrating the corners, and you'll also see at the ends of the buildings. The colors that you see on the right are some of the color pathways that we're proposing for the corners of the building, where as the design, we'll show you the design, the intent is to celebrate specials like the media center, music, art, science. It's a Reggio Emilia school, so they've got ateliers and Discovery Commons, and all of those student specials are aggregated in the center portion of the plan where the two wings come together, and therefore the architectural expression of the facade changes from typical classrooms to specials in those areas. Next slide, please. So the view from North Carolina Avenue, this is looking southward at the building from across the street, reveals how there's a textural quality of the ultra high performing concrete panels, shown here more of the terracotta color. And that happens at the array of classrooms. There's 4 or 5 classrooms on either wing, on either side of the corridor. And those windows for the classrooms can be grouped in different ways to create not only architectural interest on the exterior of the building, rather than just a repetition of a classroom bay, but also to be able to group the windows on the inside of the room so that there could be opportunities to aggregate windows for nice views, but also to separate windows to get windows closer to the demising walls or the walls between classrooms to let light come into the room and bounce off of walls and therefore bounce deeper into the spaces as a daylighting and energy saving measure. The most prominent feature of course, is the vibrancy and the sculptural quality of the corner. And this is where we are celebrating things like the entrance, which we'd like to make clear and strong at that main gathering place, the main terrace on the front of the building. You'll see that in the orange. The next level up has another round of specials from Media Center and Science Labs, and then above that, even more special. So we're taking advantage of the ability to have bays, which give us some sculptural quality, and that not only step out, but also step over to create movement and celebration at the street corner. Next slide, please. This is a view looking from D Street, looking to over and through the play area at that inside corner of the building as it's opened up with the northwest leg on the left and the north-south leg on the west and the east-west leg on the right. You'll see that the program here is reflected as more classrooms. Indeed, that's what they are. But when we get into the inside corner of the building, there again, it's a celebration of those specials. And you'll notice this round circle, this call out is showing that the building also steps up in those zones, and we are studying with the school the opportunities to take advantage of, as the building steps up and steps in those inside corners, that opportunities for the students to engage with more outdoor learning and take messy projects to the outside, and also further break down the massing of a generally linear building. The expression of the materiality on the far ends of the building, you'll see on the left of the building where there is more gray and more color, not just the terracotta panels wrapping around. We felt that that was a nice way to change the materiality of the building for some variety and some contrast, and the ability to also mark that in the center of those ends and facades, that is indeed more public space, stairways coming up and down, and so the ability to provide more color and again show that expression of shared versus sort of assigned classrooms. Next slide, please. This is the view from the corner of D Street and 3rd Street. You'll see on the left of the building the sculptural qualities of the outside corner, celebrating the corner of North Carolina and 3rd Street. And again, the end of the building here on the right side with the ability to use a little bit more texture and color as a backdrop to the streetscape. Next slide. A view from the North Carolina Ave on the end of the building. To the left, the white mass is the church next to our building, and here you can see that the end of this facade again is the aluminum composite material illustrated here, rendered here in the gray, and with the colored panels to mark the vertical shared stairs. Next slide, please. A more detailed view of that front entrance. We've got the front door, which is receding and inverted back so that it is facing more towards the corner. And that way it can receive visitors that are walking from 3rd Street and also on North Carolina Ave. We're looking at ways to incorporate sort of an increase in color at that door area to better mark the door entrance, and to include what we're calling a brow just above the door. That brow, in addition to holding up the signage for Brent Elementary School, provides a just slightly more cover for students that may be waiting for a parent to pick them up, or a parent who is getting a child out of a stroller, in lieu of providing a large canopy at the front of the school. There are multiple entrances to the school, and functionally, the school at pickup and drop off may elect to use not only the front door, but also I'll say the door from the dining space on the inside corner of the building. That is a door that leads out to the playground. Next slide, please. A little view at the front playground. This is what we're seeing here is the North Carolina facade and the sidewalk along North Carolina Ave on the left-hand side of this visualization. And this is something that we're continuing to study in terms of the exact fit and function of the components out in the side in the play area, but that the idea that the building is indeed set back, it's aligning with the church, which you can see in white beyond it, and that space between the sidewalk and the setback would be used for, proposing to use it for additional educational outdoor teaching and learning and fitness and play. Next slide, please. Some more overall views. I don't know if there's much more that this illustrates, except to say that the farther, so the larger context of the neighborhood is a 3-story building, and along with the mature vegetation, Folger Park and the other park, it's sort of in keeping with the overall verticality of the neighborhood. Next slide. Again, a couple of other overalls. This is the one from 3rd Street on the top. Of course, the building is opened up, so you're seeing not only 3rd Street facade sort of flat on, but also the North Carolina facade on the left of the upper image. The way this is rendered looks like the left-hand side might be a darker color than the right-hand side. It's not the case. It's just the modeling software providing a different shading on that side. But that there would be the variety of the wing on the 3rd Street side and the wing on the North Carolina side would be differentiated or subdivided by that corner element. On the lower elevation also shows the variety of the overall composition, so that it is a rather long building in a residential neighborhood. And so we felt that changing from the terracotta panels to the aluminum composite, again shown in gray, would be advantageous to, again, breaking down the overall massing. Next slide. We did investigate other options for how to begin and end a wall. For example, we looked at options to have bays all along the wall. One thing, the last study that we looked at most recently was if there is at the center or the corner, I should say, of the building, if there's a movement or sculptural expression of how one wall changes to another, how the terracotta changes to sort of the more vibrant, can we try that as we've all been informally calling as a bookend on the other end of the wall? So you'll see highlighted on either ends of the elevation here is an idea that the far ends of the wall could also have bays that start to project out. And we thought it was interesting. However, we do believe that it's starting to make the building more complicated, perhaps not in this particular view, but as we start to think about what the opposite side of the facade does, if it should do the same sort of bookend stepping out, then actually it starts to get a little bit more complicated in terms of the geometry on the north side of the building, which is generally stepping out at the corners, and then the geometry on the inside of the playground facade is generally stepping in. And so we researched it, we looked at it multiple ways and felt that adding more detail was probably adding undue complexity to the overall facade without much of a benefit in terms of the program on the inside. Next slide, please. The remainder of the presentation goes through the floor plans. So I will stop with the presentation now. This image, I think, succinctly shows that the floor plans are an expression of this basic party diagram where there are neighborhoods, as the school calls them, or small learning communities on either side of the center of the building, which again is the specials that I've described, like library, music, science labs, and etc. So I will, I'll stop the presentation there if that's okay. And yeah, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you for that. Any questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question based on the presentation we just heard. Could you just articulate for us what you think are the most salient aspects of this design that make it compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District?
Yes, we believe that it is appropriate expression of a civic building within a residential neighborhood, meaning that we are able to maintain the general height and create some massing interest within a residential neighborhood, but also allow there to be hierarchy for something different and civic at the corner of the building. In terms of the compatibility with the residential neighborhood. We, as mentioned before, we did not intend to be mimetic, but certainly intended to provide a texture of windows that is akin to an overall textural qualities of a, this is a half a block, but the overall textural qualities of a full block within the Capitol Hill neighborhood.
But is there anything specific about the Capitol Hill Historic District that you believe that your building is compatible with?
Certainly, with the use of materials that include both a natural material, a natural hue material, like some of the brick that you see, but in addition to the natural clay brick, there are many of the residences are also painted, and there's a wide variety of color. So I think there's a variety of materials that are reflective and colors that are reflective of the neighborhood, in addition to the use of bays, in our instance, at very specific points that celebrate the entrance of the building, and also the height of the building is in keeping with this neighborhood.
You have bay windows? I don't see any in this drawing. What's a bay?
Right. We're not using bay windows at every window. We're using them on the corner of the building to start to accentuate the movement and the change from the terracotta color to the colored panels on the corner.
Okay.
Chair Heath, this may be in alignment with my colleague Matt Bell's questions, but I have a question of, I guess, both maybe Andrew Lewis and the applicant, but maybe starting with Andrew first. I wondered if this has been to the Commission of Fine Arts, and if it has, if they've had any formal comments, and if not, if there have been any initial meetings, and if you could relay any comments that they've had leading up to this about the design.
Yes, Member Failer, to my knowledge, this has not gone to CFA yet. The team can correct me if I'm wrong in that, but we have participated in a number of agency review meetings. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this design has gone through many iterations. To Board Member Bell's comment earlier, it actually started off with something that did have repetitive bays that was much more directly related to the rhythms and the details that you find in the surrounding historic district. They also incorporated fins, if you will, that DCPS felt did not provide enough light or interrupted the light into the classrooms. And so this design that you see now was ultimately presented as an alternative. I think in many ways, and I'll let DCPS or DGS respond to that, but to provide more light to the classrooms. Staff at CFA have not raised any objections. They seem to imply in their comments, I obviously cannot speak for CFA formally, but they seem to imply with their comments that they felt the building was generally compatible with the historic district. So that's all I can offer at this point. I do want to respond to Board Member Marzella's question earlier and point out, I apologize that the staff report should have included reference to ongoing archaeological investigations. Apparently there's been some field work on the site, and our archaeological team is reviewing that field work to determine whether any additional investigations will be necessary. But at this point, no definitive statements have been made by them or findings have been made, so they're still in consultation regarding the archaeology. But our staff report should reflect that if the board finds this compatible, that the approval would also require an appropriate response to any significant archaeological resources if they are found on the site.
Great, thanks for looking into that.
Hi, I had some additional questions about the archaeology as well. So I was looking at the 1888 footprint on the Sanborn maps for Brent School, and I was trying to get a sense of what the urban build out in that area has looked like over time. And then you also mentioned in your presentation that there's a basement level that it exists. And my first question about the archaeology is what year was that basement level um, built? Was that at when the school was originally constructed, or if it was added later? Do you know that currently?
This is Mei Zingwen. I believe it is um, original to the school in 1968.
Okay. And then my second question is, I know that you said that there is some archaeological testing happening, and I'm curious about what exactly that is. Do you know roughly if are there shovel test pits being done? Are we talking about pedestrian surveys? What's the overall scope of your archaeological investigations?
I'll go ahead and answer that.
Oh,
The
yeah.
scope is something that we're working to confirm now with DCPS and DGS. And we can provide more information as we confirm that scope.
Okay, great, thank you. But you don't know if that, what level that is, if that's pedestrian survey, if it's excavation. You're not sure at this time.
No, I'm sorry, Ms. Miller, I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I had
Any
another
other?
question.
Oh,
if
go
I
ahead, Bill.
could. Yeah, so I wonder if you could clarify for me. I don't know if this is just the way that the drawings are rendered, but when I interpret them, I'm seeing some inconsistency between what's shown on the kind of perspective renderings, the axon, and what's shown on the elevations and floor plans, specifically for the D Street side. When I look at the perspectives, it seems to show a pretty good amount of fenestration on that side. And yet when I look at the elevation and plan, so yeah, so this is a great view. I'm interpreting this as, a lot of kind of windows on that side, but when I look at the plan, I don't really see any except for at the maybe stairwell in the center. So I wonder if you could clarify what's being proposed there.
What is being proposed is what is shown here in the elevations. The plans are at a working schematic level, and we are continuing to add detail to the plans so that they reflect the design intent shown here in the perspectives and the elevations.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, let's shift gears to public testimony. We have one person who's registered to speak, and that's Beth Purcell. Is Ms. Purcell on the line?
Yes, good morning, board members. This is Beth Purcell with the
Good.
We
If you could speak a little louder, it's really hard to hear you.
strongly support this project. This is, like I said, this is Beth Purcell with the Capital Hill Restoration Society. We strongly support this project, particularly.
We really can't hear her. Very difficult.
Yeah, I thought it was just me. Can you try again? I don't know if you can speak closer to your mic.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, a little bit.
Sounded
Yes.
like it was better, yeah.
Okay, let me try. I apologize for that, love.
There's something strange going on with your camera. It looks like.
Well, it's not on.
Oh, because we're seeing something moving.
Oh dear.
Something like in a green background, maybe trees or something.
That came up when I logged in, but let me just say, we support the project. You have our comments. That's basically, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any questions for Ms. Purcell? Pretty simple statement, but we do have her letter in the record. Okay. Then we'll turn back to the board. Normally we turn back to the applicant for you to make any comments based on the testimony, but it's supportive. So wouldn't imagine you'd have anything to rebut. But you can make a closing before the board deliberates if you'd like.
No further comments. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Okay. Thanks. Are we ready to deliberate? All right. I have no issues with the proposed concept and would be ready to support, but I would be curious to hear comments from others.
Well, in general, I think the building massing wise and the way it sits on the site is generally, fine. And I think the use of materials seems to be an interesting interpretation of what goes on up there on Capitol Hill. Looking at this perspective right here that's on the screen, I wonder a little bit why that silver metal panel material is on that facade and why they just don't turn the corner with the concrete panels. But I think I would offer the following, Marnique. Support for the concept. I don't think the entrance is quite fleshed out yet. I think it needs some more studies. I can't really tell what they're proposing from the perspective that's there. It's very, very hard to tell. It seems overly, I can't tell what's in front of what and how that thing stacks up and whatnot. It might be very nice or not. So I think there's probably some more studies and exhibits that OP ought to work through with them on that. I think the color thing is at the entrance is sort of a nice way to celebrate that entry there. I understand the idea, I think, of the canopy and whatnot. I just think it's confusing to me what actually the different levels of the building are doing in that location. And I think they would be well advised to spend some time with Steve and the staff to just sort through that and get that right. I think the splaying of the wall seems like a kind of interesting potential for the massing, which is a pretty simple building. So you sort of, take your places where you can have some sort of articulation where you can. Doing it at the entry seems to me to be a reasonable thing. So I think my support is kind of qualified in a sense. I think it needs one more sort of hard look in terms of some of these issues, particularly around the entrance. But I think probably I could support it with the idea that OP and the applicant ought to sit down and really work some of that stuff out.
I agree with you, Matt. My comments are along the same lines that and I'm glad you asked about the applicant for their perspective on compatibility with the historic district, because I feel like the design is overly worked. Now it's become like it needs to be simplified and relax a little bit and go back to the original partie and then be developed. I feel like some of the elements, while maybe the scale is appropriate for the historic district, the long lengths of windows and like the ribbon windows and some of the material choices, I don't necessarily feel are incompatible in and of themselves as units, but in the composition of the facade, it doesn't feel like this is of Capitol Hill. It could sit in Capitol Hill, but it doesn't feel like it's a part of Capitol Hill. if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was the nature of my question, for the most part. It certainly has a scale in terms of the height and
Yeah.
it does that. I just, I think maybe the different color row houses are an interesting interpretation there, as is the red brick. The side facades do seem extremely energetic, to the point where maybe they could be simplified. I think you're right.
Let's relax, yeah.
Yeah, calm down. And even the extent to which all of a sudden on the other side of the building, we get the silver panels popping up on the street elevation, maybe ought to be something thought about as well. It's a pretty straightforward partie. It does address the corner. It does fill out the block. I mean, there's a lot of things that just at the basic level, it does just fine.
Yeah, yeah. I'd add too, it would be helpful to know the comments from CFA, as their purview is different than ours. I think
Yeah.
it'd be really helpful to know their design perspective, because it's much broader than ours. Ours is focused specifically on compatibility and the vocabulary within the historic district, right, as preservation. But there are
Yeah.
certainly things that could develop in the dialogue, and I would hope that I know that Andy would do diligence to represent our comments and certainly represent the character of the historic district. No doubt about that, but it'd be helpful to know that too. Know the Commissioner of Fine Arts comments.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, I was,
Sorry, go ahead, Marnie. I have one other
Yeah.
comment, but go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say at the entrance, there's a very strong reading of this as 3 stacked horizontal layers are there. And I think the entrance might be a place where that might not occur. With the strong readings of the horizontal windows and even the lines articulating at least a representation of the floor slabs in the part with the concrete panels is evident. At the corner, it seems to me, is a place where maybe that sort of abrupt kind of slicing of the building like stacked pizza boxes does not occur, and actually could have a little more vertical unity there. I think that would help, because what happens is that the building has a strongly predominant horizontal reading in a context which really doesn't.
I was gonna add, though, to Gretchen's point, that one of the things I was concerned about is how this might evolve based on CFA comments. And I would wonder if we'd want this to come back to us. I mean, if it changes, I don't know what qualifies as substantially, but if there are design changes that require them to go back and evolve the concept, I think we'd want this to come back to us. So at least we have an opportunity to see how it evolves. So maybe it's appropriate for us to approve the general height and massing of the concept, and ask them to begin to think about some of the comments from the board, have them go to CFA, get those comments, and then come back to us so that there's a more cohesive approach to how this develops.
Actually,
me.
Marnique, I was going to say before we motion for that, there's some things that are premature for me as far as the archaeological investigations go. So
Okay.
when I'm thinking about what possible ground disturbance there could be in the concepts, knowing that there's a pre-existing basement portion that was created in the 60s, I would like to know if there were any reports at that time about any archaeological material coming up. Just looking into the history of this footprint that they're building on, not just the Brent Elementary School, which existence is going into the late 19th century, but also that during the early 19th century, it was also a space school as well. There's a lot that could be that I could know more about conceptually about what their ground disturbing impact is going to be. Like where the current playground is, you know, we're dealing with something that if they're going to replace that in the same way, that wouldn't be a large undertaking. But there's been a footprint for a school here for a very, very long time. So without knowing what the results, what the scope of their archaeological testing is, first of all, and if that's sufficient to really determine whether or not their proposed undertaking is going to impact something, I really couldn't address that or say anything about that without any preliminary results from their archaeological excavations, because it could be that even their proposed footprint isn't appropriate for what the disturbance for the potential archaeological resources in the area could be.
So you're looking for a preliminary report?
Yeah, even if it's based off of an initial survey, whether or not they have to do additional testing. Right now, I don't know if there are concentrations of artifacts, foundations, or anything that looks back to how the space has been used since the early 19th century without even some sort of preliminary survey. So they could have a plan for part of this footprint that could go over significant archaeological resources, and I just wouldn't know without that survey having some sort of preliminary result.
Okay.
I would add in the site features too, Chair. I think that in some locations we see like solid brick walls of an unknown height around the perimeter, which is different than might be compatible within the historic district. Like on it's slide 20 of our packet. There's some brick walls, or, you know, or stacked brick shown in other areas. There's fencing. So it'd be good to know what happens around the entire perimeter, because, you know, in the historic district, it is unusual to have, you know, a 6-foot high brick wall right at the sidewalk. It's not compatible.
Okay.
So in addition to the
other-
building, just how the landscape is developed, I guess.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or requests?
Hi, yes, this is Elise Roeder with DGS. I just wanted to speak to the archaeology a little bit. So we have done a phase 1 and we found some remnants of the original school building in sort of the opposite corner of the site where the building is now. There was some wood flooring. We are intending to do a phase 2 once the school relocates out of it. But we're not anticipating it to impact our footprint design as part of what it is now, because all of the archaeology was sort of in a location that is that was previously the current building does not currently sit at, and we are anticipating to take that all out and remove it as part of this construction project once that starts.
Would you want to see that?
I would love to see that.
I really
That'd be
would think
very
that would. Okay.
Thank you. But it's helpful
That
to
could-
know where those resources were found and where that is in relation to your current footprint proposal. So
And
that's
we will review that with the Historic Preservation Office right now. Ruth has been engaged with us this whole time. And so she was out when we did the phase 1 and is sort of in agreement there that the footprint should proceed as is.
okay. That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
All right, so then I will make a motion that we support the or approve the general height and massing of this concept, but ask that it come back to us with more thought given to the comments that the board addressed today. And once the applicant has gone to CFA, so that we have a better understanding of the commission's comments and direction for the design. And I'll ask for a second.
I'll second that and ask a question then. Do you feel like
Sure.
we have offered enough dialogue and conversation to give CFA an understanding, because they're a broader design perspective, what are the character defining features or character significant character elements of the Capitol Hill Historic District relative to the school in our dialogue, so that they could consider that in their overall deliberation about the design of the building? Or are there other things that
We didn't talk about that, but we could, I mean, and perhaps Andy can provide them with.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're having joint discussions. Often
Yeah.
that happens.
I think some of the comments that Matt offered initially, and then some of the things that you mentioned also do relate to the character defining elements. And then,
okay.
So I think that.
Do you think that's sufficient then?
Mhm.
I wasn't
I
sure if
think
that
so.
was enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I just want to make sure that everybody else and that you are comfortable with it.
Okay, all right. All right. Any further discussion? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so the motion carries. Thank you. We look forward to seeing this come back. All right, and we're ready to move to our next case, also in the Capitol Hill Historic District at 510 8th Street Southeast.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. This is Jack Jones with HPO staff to present for 510 8th Street. The applicant is seeking a concept review of a rooftop addition and two-story plus cellar rear addition to two existing homes on one parcel, which are contributing structures in the Capitol Hill Historic District. Both were constructed in 1891 and are on the prominent Barracks Row on 8th Street. Currently, the row houses serve as office space, and the proposal will convert the usage to residential. A total of 7 units will be created. The front facades of both row houses will remain as they look now. Work is just occurring on the rooftop and on the rear. The rear walls will be demolished to accommodate the new rear additions, which add extra square footage to the units on all 3 floors. The rooftop addition will be made of standing seam metal and will be designed to look like a mansard with an angled front to reduce visibility. 2 of the 8 units will be housed within the rooftop, or I guess just one of the rooftops now. They've made some design changes. The overall design is successful in differentiating itself from the historic character of the building using differentiated materials. Staff performed a flag test on October 7th to determine the amount of visibility based on plans dated September 20th, 2024. So it should be noted that the flag test photos included in the staff report are from a previous version of plans that have since been updated. To reduce the oblique of visibility seen in the flag test, staff recommended the applicant set back the addition further. The board has typically required that rooftop additions be set back substantially to reduce their massing and impact on the rooftop from the street. The applicant successfully set the addition back and lowered the roof in the center over the staircase, and the current proposed plans dated November 5th, 2024. Therefore, HPO recommends the board find the project compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District and delegate final approval to staff. And I believe the architect is on the line, so I will defer to him unless anyone has any questions for me.
Is the applicant ready to present?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Gerald Sanchez, and I'm with Michael Graves, and we are the architect hired to design and do the project at the moment. Thank you, Jack, for the production and the presentation, and we can go ahead and quickly present the project. Moving to the next slide. So we are here just because we are in the historic district. We're not requesting any zoning relief of any kind. The only thing that we are doing is that 3rd floor addition that John was just talking about. It's triggering even in that review of the project. Mind going to the next slide. This is part of that zoning analysis or representation illustration, showing that we have plenty of setbacks, complying with all the setbacks that are required. And if you move to the next slide. For those that are not knowledgeable of the location, this is where the project is located. You can see the Eastern Market Metro there on the top in the middle. Next slide will have a bit of more information on the block itself. So it's the two buildings that are currently 510, originally two separate buildings that have been renovated to be an office building. And then we're just bringing back the usage of residential. See to the next slide. This is another slide showing the location of it. So it's nestled between Trattoria's and Elsa there, so right next to Cantina, White House Cantina, Hamburger Cafe, and Star DC. Next slide. These are some existing picture of the rear yard and the front yard on the left. So you can see there's a stair, a metal stair structure that's attached to the existing rear facade of the building that as we will see in a few slides that we're proposing to the model. Next slide, please. These are existing conditions of the interior of the project. The office space currently is. Next slide. And the next few slides, we're going to go quickly to it. So we're proposing a complete demolition of the interior walls, keeping as much as we can of the existing demising wall as existed, and then demolition of the rear walls to be able to accommodate the use of a residential needs for this time. Yeah, you can move to the next, so you can go, and the next one. Then on the roof, an existing roof, we're planning that third floor addition, so there will be some modifications to the roof. Then this is what we propose for the cellar, semi subterranean level there. We are proposing a 2 bedrooms, also with their separate entrance. And on the first floor, level 1, it's where you can enter the rest of the units through 8th Street. And there are 2 new 2-bedroom units on each side, to the north and the south. The next one, and then the level 2 will have the same layout. And the third floor addition on this slide, with the updated setbacks, as Mr. Jones mentioned. We of note that solid setback, that was the one that was driving a lot of the conversation since the White House show and Belga Cafe building. It's fairly short. It was barely visible. We are matching the setback of the current White House show roof deck. It's there, the structure, the fixed structure of White House show, not including all the temporary elements that they have in front of it. Next slide, please. Then the rooftop. Next slide, please. This is the elevation from 8th Street, along 8th Street. So you can see the height is fairly limited, even in an orthogonal elevation. We're keeping it to 10 feet to the top of the structure to make sure that everything is now visible or barely visible for most of the angles of the building. You can move to the next slide. On the rear yard, we are keeping the the standing seam all across, although on the rear yard it's more flat. It doesn't receive the mansard treatment. Next slide. Here you can see the section with through the stairs that with coordination with the HPO and previous iteration, we received comments that in order to make the project feasible, it was allowed for us to the stairs to extend a little bit and then just make sure that we can just slant it as much as we can while still maintaining the functionality of the stairs and all the clearances. And that's what we did. We pushed it even further. And then once you go to the other side, you can see how the setback is. It's a way greater setback than we had originally. Please. These are just the square footage of the units. I know that in previous iteration, it's always useful to have what are the type of units that we're bringing to the community. As you can see, they are either typical or larger than your traditional 2-bedroom units for the DC market. So they are comfortable 2-bedroom units. And now we have some render views of the different areas and locations around the block. This is across A Street, that was the back. As you can see, the two-part materials. This is a slide that we prepared to show the orange ones are elements or buildings that are of similar height to ours, so 30 feet or over 30 feet. And then the little parts indicate buildings that have a third floor or rooftop addition already built. We did some comparison of renders and photoshops to show how the structure may be seen or not seen from different views. You will see from these that where it is visible, it is from specific locations across the block, across the corner in very oblique views for a very short or brief time, as you can see there on those view ones. Next slide, please. Along the street or on the sidewalk on the side of the building, so you can see anything of that addition will not be viewed along that street. Next slide, please. And then across the street of 8th Street, you do see it a little bit on the winter when the trees are not completely foliage. And but we took into reducing as much as we can that visibility to meet the guidelines that were set forth by the HPO and the staff. Next slide. These are other views from across. I know that in the original, like from the same street but across the sidewalk, on the original submission, we had quite a bit that was shown, and we can see here that you only see a little bit of that structure for the stairs. Next slide. These are the sidelines to illustrate how much, like the little bit of that portion of the stairs that you should be seeing directly across the building. Next slide. These are, and I think I saw a letter by Ms. Karen Lawson. I might be misremembering her name. But then she did reach out to us. She has some concerns about the roof, or sorry, the structure invading and getting some of their sunlight out. And we had some back and forth coordination or feedback, and we did manage to reduce that how much it sticks out that addition or like north leg addition by about 9 inches. We reduced it to limit the impact to her rear yard. We also received some feedback during the ANC and along with email communication with her on some of the locations of our mechanical equipment on the rear yard. So we moved that towards the south, so it's more towards the commercial property rather than towards the residential properties on the north. to limit any noise pollution or any noise creeping from those units, as well as, if, I believe on the next slide, yeah, these are some of the views, as well as we indicated that we were doing a commercial grade trash enclosure, as they were worried about any rats or anything that they've seen having issues with other similar residential conversions to condos around the area. So we took that into consideration. I think this is the last line, I believe. Yes. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Great, thank you. Any questions from board members?
All right now.
Questions? Okay. Then let's hear from Ms. Purcell, who's registered to give testimony. Ms. Purcell, are you still on the line?
I don't see her on the line. She may have signed off
With her technical issues?
Ye-
Okay.
I don't want to speak from Ms. Purcell, but in the exhibits and information that was given, we do have the letter of recommendation from the Capitol Hill Restoration Society, as well as from the agency that issued.
Yes, both of those are in the record. I did see those.
She may be trying to sign back on, but I'm unsure of how long that will take.
Sure, okay. All right. Okay, so I'll turn back to the board if there are any questions. In Capitol Hill Restoration Society's letter, they, Ms. Purcell notes that some committee members were concerned with the massing and visibility of the roof deck and mechanical. Can you talk about those discussions and anything you've done to address that?
Yes, so I think that was on the original version of the plan, so we are not planning to have any mechanical stuff on top of that third floor addition. We are gonna just have them all on the ground level of that rear yard.
Got it. Okay, so no longer on the roof.
Yeah, so it's not gonna be a rooftop deck or a mechanical cover on the rooftop. They're all gonna be in the rear. We are proposing a small like rooftop area for that third floor unit. But that will be obviously having all the setbacks and anything that we need to do. So any of the handrails or anything is seen from the bottom. So similar to the neighbors on flyout, so it's just a little space there. Yeah.
Okay. See, give Ms. Purcell one last opportunity before we deliberate. I still don't see her. Okay, then is the board ready to deliberate? I'll ask the board members turn on their cameras. This to me appears to be a fairly straightforward and compatible proposal at these sites. So I have no issues with them and would support the staff report.
Second that.
Yeah, I agree with
Okay.
that.
All right. Then I will make a motion to support the staff report. I think you almost gave a second, Gretchen, but let's just make that official.
I'll second officially then.
Okay, thanks. Then any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Then the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Sure. All right, we've reached our lunch break and we're ahead of schedule about 20 minutes. So do we want to try to come back maybe at 12:15? So we'll be slightly ahead of schedule, but with the hopes that the applicant will be on by that time. Does 12:15 work?
Fine by me.
Okay, perfect. We'll see you all then. Good afternoon. It's now 12:15 and we're ready to resume our afternoon hearings for today, beginning with 16 3rd Street Northeast in the Capitol Hill Historic District.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board.
Scott, are you ready to present?
This
Or-
is
sorry, Jack.
Jones. It's okay. People mix us up with the same last name all the time. So I'm Jack Jones with HPO's staff. I will be presenting for 16 3rd Street Northeast, which is a concept review for the removal of a rear L and construction of a 3-story plus cellar rear addition to a contributing row house in the Capitol Hill Historic District. It's a wood frame row house that was constructed prior to 1874 and is located on a row on the east side of Square 759. On this row, 16, 18, and 23rd Street Northeast are all connected by a mansard roof, and terrace court access from A Street runs through the square. On the front facade, you'll see many kind of alterations or changes that are generally included with projects like this, including removal of vinyl windows for aluminum clad windows, removal of aluminum siding for wooden siding, the addition of a basement window to provide some light to the new proposed basement. And on the rear, the existing L would be removed and a new 3-story addition constructed that extends to the basement level. The upper story of the new addition will connect to the existing 3rd floor with the rear of the mansard roof removed. So the proposed changes to the front facade are consistent with the board's guidelines for windows, doors, sidings, and basement window wells. The board has typically permitted alteration, removal, and/or replacement of rear L wings unless they are part of a row that retains a high degree of integrity. While the 2-story L wing on this house is likely original to the building, its integrity has been compromised by later alterations and additions, as have others on this row. Accordingly, HPO recommends approval of the removal and replacement of the existing rear L. However, as proposed, the 3-story addition would result in the removal of the rear face of the mansard roof. While the board has typically been flexible in permitting alterations and additions on rear elevations of row buildings, this flexibility has been given because the rear elevations of most row buildings are entirely utilitarian in design and devoid of character-defining features. By contrast, the mansard roof on the rear of the subject house in this row is quite unusual, distinctive, and retains its integrity as an important character-defining feature. Its visibility from Terrace Court, one of the few alleys in Capitol Hill that retains rare 1880s alley dwellings, adds to its importance as a feature that contributes to the character of the historic district. HPO recommends lowering the rear addition or creating a design that would otherwise preserve this unique feature that spans along the row. With that being said, I will pass it off to the applicant, who I believe is on the line, and remain on the line if anyone has any questions.
Thanks, Jack. Yes, I'm here. Natalie Canine with MV Architects. As Jack mentioned, 16 3rd Street Northeast is a single-family home located approximately in the middle of the block of a series of row homes, with the block being bound by A Street Northeast at the north and East Capitol Street Northeast at the south. You can go to the next slide. This slide shows the top images showing the front facades along the block of 3rd Street Northeast, with the bottom images showing the materiality of the properties adjacent to the subject property, 16 3rd Street Northeast. I don't think anybody has any issue with the front facade, so we can move on to the next slide. We've been studying the site through the use of Sanborn maps and BICE maps, and we've developed a concept site plan diagram showing the changes that have occurred at the site over time, with the red indicating 1-story additions, blue indicating a 2-story addition, either done all at once or 2 additions over time. The green indicates a 3rd floor addition, the yellow dotted hatch a roof deck, and the red linear hatch indicates a removed building. The green hatch indicates a removed front porch or a planned porch never built. So as you can see, there's been significant modification at the adjacent properties. We can go to the next slide. This slide shows on the upper left a historic view of the rear of the site, where you can see 16, 18, and 20 all built on the same permit and sharing that mansard roof, and having similar rear Ls. The rear L dogleg massing was a consistent feature in many of these houses along the block. The string of photos at the bottom shows the rear elevations from the alley at their current state. There have been significant modifications or removal of character-defining features at the rear of many of the properties on 3rd Street Northeast block, neighboring number 16. These changes at the rear of the properties of this block have become a regular practice. Looking specifically at the buildings adjacent to number 16, number 18, and number 20. At number 18, roof decks were constructed at the 1-story and 2-story L, altering the existing historic roof massing and blocking view of the mansard roof. This also obscures views of the mansard roof at number 16 and number 20 from portions of the alley. There has been extensive modification of existing openings at the rear. New windows are not compatible with historic design or materials. The 2 round-top dormers at the mansard roof have been removed and replaced with a single wider shed dormer. This can be seen in the upper right-hand photo. A double patio door and 2 double-hung windows with aluminum siding below lack any material or stylistic connection to the historic fabric of the site. The curved profile of the mansard roof itself is noticeably obscured due to the size of the new dormer, with the top of the shed dormer extending to the top of the mansard. At number 20, extensive modifications of the existing openings at the rear of the house have occurred. New windows and stucco material are not historically compatible. The rear wall of the 2-story L has been shifted and the chimney has been modified. A rooftop deck has been added to the 1-story portion of the L with a guardrail that does not fit the design historically. The existing right side dormer at the mansard roof has been removed and replaced with a wider shed dormer with a pair of windows. The mansard roof is not fully visible from the alley, as mentioned before, as it is blocked by the roof decks at number 18. Again, you can see the modifications of number 20 in the upper right-hand photo. On the other side of number 16, number 14 also once had a similar rear L massing. The 2-story addition was added and the dogleg filled in. Another 2-story addition was added to the existing single-story portion of the L. The rear facade, as it currently stands, has been completely modified and is no longer existing. The dormers at number 16 are also partially blocked due to the massing of number 14. You can go to the next slide. These are some additional photos showing different views of the neighboring properties from inside the 2nd and 3rd floors of number 16. Next slide. This next set of photos shows the properties across the alley from number 16, which have also been extensively modified. This, in combination with the photos already shared of the rear of the 3rd Street buildings, show that the condition of the alley as having a utilitarian character is very different from the more formal front elevations. Next slide. These photos show more specific details of the current condition of the rear L at 16 3rd Street Northeast. The existing rear L has aluminum siding and vinyl windows, which are not historically significant. It is uncertain whether window locations have been modified, as the materials are not original. The window design and proportion of some of the windows are not historically consistent. There is water damage at the rear L, which can be seen at the exterior with the heaving concrete and organic growth at the site, showing issues with water drainage. There are rotting sills at the windows, and there is also rotting wood at the existing basement areaway entrance and the wood entrance to the window well at the basement of the 2-story L, the 2-story L. This shows that water has been readily allowed to enter the foundation of the building. Also on this page, there are additional photos of the mansard roof showing some issues with the existing built-in gutter with standing water. You can go to the next slide. Due to the obviously visible issues with the rear L. We had a structural report and investigation done. You can go to the next slide. So these are some of the photos from the report. The investigation identified issues with the existing rear L. The report is part of the record that was included. The existing bearing wall studs, floor framing, and roof framing are all undersized. You can go to the next slide. These interior photos of the L show the significant sagging and bowing at the first floor and second floor framing that is included in the report. There is cracking at the interior wall and ceiling finishes and also at the brick basement foundation walls due to building settlement. These structural defects would require significant rebuilding and replacement of existing historic structure. Currently, the highest ceiling height at the one-story L is 7'4", and there are lower ceiling heights. So when all said and done, an existing historic structure is replaced to meet current code requirements. Ceiling heights would not be habitable and meet current code. The structural inadequacies at number 16 are evidence of lacking physical integrity. You can go to the next slide. Due to the deterioration of the rear L due to the lack of maintenance and modifications with incompatible materials, the design proposes the removal of the existing rear L and replacement with a new 3-story addition. The existing main block would remain, and a new basement would be constructed under the addition and existing main block. The new addition has a dog leg referencing the dog leg that was originally common among houses on this block. The new addition, set back from the alley, that allows for more parking than the original house. You can go to the next slide. This drawing shows the rear elevation. So the drawing on the left is the existing elevation and the drawing on the right is the proposed elevations. The proposed addition is 2 stories at the alley side and then steps up to 3 stories where it connects to the existing main building by removing the rear of the mansard roof. The new windows are aluminum clad windows with 2/2 design, and the proposed siding at the rear is a Hardie type siding. The windows at the 3rd floor are casement with a false check rail to accommodate egress, while the rest of the windows are double hung, matching the front. You can go to the next slide. The drawing on the left is the existing side elevation. You can see the railing of the deck at the adjacent property number 18. And then the drawing on the bottom is the proposed elevation, and you can see that the building steps back as it gets further away from, or it steps up as you get further away from the alley where it connects to the existing mansard roof, but does not rise higher than the elevation of the mansard roof. Next slide. The drawing on the left shows the existing front elevation, and the drawing on the right is the proposed front elevation. New 2/2 double hung windows with operable wood shutters will replace the existing windows at their current locations at the 1st and 2nd floor. At the 3rd floor, new casement windows with false check rail will replace the windows of the current dormers to comply with egress. A new door and transom window will be installed in the existing opening. The existing aluminum siding will be replaced by new wood siding. The existing stone front porch will remain. A new window well will be added to the basement, but we'll have an operable grate to allow the surface of the porch to remain level so that it will not be visible from the street. You can go to the next slide. In the next several slides, I have some floor plans that show the proposed design. I'll move quickly through these. This is showing, the previous slide was showing the demolition of the existing basement of the 2-story L. This slide shows the demolition at the rear L, and then also some internal demolition at the main block as well. Next slide. This drawing shows the demolition work at the 2nd floor with the removal of the 2-story portion of the L and some interior demolition at the main block. Next slide. And then the 3rd floor demolition plan, which shows the removal of that back portion of the mansard roof and dormers, along with interior demolition. Next slide. The following slides are the proposed floor plans for the new design. So this is the basement floor plan where we will have a new basement under the existing main block of the house and then a full basement as well under the addition. There'll be a new areaway connecting to the exterior from the basement level, and then you can see the window well at the front. Next slide. This drawing shows the proposed floor plan with the new addition at the rear, as well as the rear parking area. The addition provides a larger kitchen space, more appropriate for today's needs than would allow in the existing L. It also maintains the dogleg form. Next slide. This drawing shows the existing main block at the front and then the rear addition at the back. Next slide. And then this drawing shows the third floor where you can see the roof of the two-story portion. And then the smaller addition at the third floor, which connects to the existing third floor mansard area. We've received letters of support from various neighbors at 11 3rd Street Northeast, 12 3rd Street Northeast, and 22 3rd Street Northeast. And we've also had discussions and met with ANC 6C as well. I think that's it for my presentation.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the board? There's quite a bit of demo here, and as you saw in the staff report, they are recommending that we not find the removal of the rear mansard compatible. Have you explored ways to maintain that?
We have begun looking at this, trying to consider if we could retain a third floor addition, but also ways that we could maintain the mansard roof at the rear. So we started looking at these designs. We're not ready to present them to you at this time. I think one of the things where we've been considering is what view you have of the mansard at the rear alley. You know, is it something that you can actually see, or is it really something that's visible from above? And at what point are we trying to retain it for that above view? Or I think that's something we've been considering.
So your statement is basically you don't agree with the staff's position, because the staff's position is that is a significant contributing element, but your statement is that because you feel like it's not visible or potentially not visible, it's not a character defining element.
I think part of the issues that we've seen is that it was created, or it was built along the same permit as number 18 and number 20, and those mansard roofs have significantly been modified. So I think it's difficult to require that no modifications be done to this existing mansard roof where there has been a precedent that it's been allowed at those neighbors.
Do you know the timing of the permitting of those neighbors' properties?
I don't. And I think part of that has to do potentially with sometimes the size of the work doesn't necessarily trigger HPRB review, whereas this project has a significant, you know, size component to it, so that size factor does trigger the HPRB review, where some of it would not be triggered.
Unless it's maintenance work, all work is reviewed within the historic districts.
I couldn't find HPRB records from those projects. And then number 14, the adjacent property where there's been significant infill and modification of the rear. I know that work was permitted but not did not seem to go through HPRB review.
Well, I know from my own experience in working in the historic districts that in DC that when I apply for a building permit, all work within the historic district requires staff sign off. So in order for you to get a permit at all, so
So you would suspect that that work just was not done under permit? Is that?
could have been reviewed under if it was reviewed under if they got a building permit, it would have had a staff review and that would have been noted. That the staff reviewed it may have been reviewed at the staff level, but it would be reflected in the building permit. But if you're not able to find a building permit, then perhaps that work was not permitted work.
Yeah, I know when we met with ANC, there was, I think, kind of mixed response on some of the committee members, where some people felt that because it wasn't necessarily viewable from, the ground, that it wasn't as important. So I think some of that was mixed, and we do have I don't know that they've submitted a.
Yeah, it's a domestic grid. I think it's
a more recent report.
slurry too that goes on expired. So it's one of these.
Okay.
There's
Other questions? It doesn't look like Beth Purcell is back on the, oh, no, she is. I see her. So why don't we hear testimony from Ms. Purcell, and then we can come back to the board for any additional questions.
And we have the podium there, elements of the podium.
Are you ready to make your statement, Ms. Purcell?
That's the main.
You have to unmute yourself.
But that's.
I'm not hearing you. See, she's
better.
unmuted.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go.
Oh, thank you so much. Like I said, I'm very grateful for the board's patience with my technical struggles. Basically, as you saw from our comments, originally we took the position that the dogleg section should be preserved in its entirety, and we made the point that to the extent the structural issues were a basis for demolishing the dogleg rear section, that in the past the board has required reports from government inspectors. However, while we originally took this position, we now support the staff's approach to preserve the rear mansard. We agree with staff that mansards are character-defining features, and that on rear elevations they are very unusual. So for this reason, we support the staff's report, and if the staff's recommendations are adopted by the board, we think that in that case, the project would be compatible with the Capitol Hill Historic District. And we thank you very much for considering our comments.
All right. Thank you. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Purcell? Okay. Then I'll turn back to the board for any questions. Actually, before I do that, would the applicant like to respond to the Capitol Hill Restoration Society comments?
We appreciate the comments, and I think we've received 2 letters from them. So we also wanted to just confirm that the rear L there supporting the removal of that. Is that correct?
We're not supporting that. I guess we are supporting that because we're supporting the staff's report. So the answer would be yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess another question we have, and maybe in response to Ms. Purcell, but also the board in general, in maintaining the mansard roof, Is the intent that it would be visible from the alley, or just that it is maintained?
I guess that's a question for staff, correct?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a better question for staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jack, can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from what you can tell from the alley and some of the photos in my staff report, it is visible. It's not visible on some of the neighboring properties just because of the additions on the roofs there. And I think because this one is where you kind of turn the corner at Terrace Court, inherently, if you kind of back up into that corner, you're going to be able to see it. So the recommendation that the staff report kind of talks about is maintaining kind of a rear L feature that would allow that to be visible, just because it's visible right now from the alley, and that's what makes it character defining for that alley in particular.
Thanks, Jack. Would you be opposed to part of it being obscured and part of it being visible?
We probably have to see what that looks like.
Of course.
Jack, you can.
Yeah, no,
give your
absolutely.
thoughts.
I was going to say we could probably determine that with a simple flag test to go out there, because there's already that 2-story addition, and just add height on top of it and see what it looks like from there. And then just kind of go from there on what a appropriate height would be.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking is that a lot of the other properties on the site don't have the visible, or you don't maintain the visibility of the historic facade, like the 2 other mansard roofs where we have the roof decks and other items obscuring the mansard roof. That's why I'm asking.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
Just a quick one, Chair Heath. I wondered of the applicant, is there, when one of the things that I agree with the chair's comment about the significant amount of demolition, essentially you're leaving the shell. Are you leaving the floor structures at all? I'm wondering if the stair needs to be demolished. Are there opportunities to retain other elements in the building rather than gutting it and leaving the facades and building a new building inside of this thing?
I can respond. So we have looked at, trying to maintain the stairs. We do have some issues with the stairs not being code compliant in terms of like rise and run, but also the width of the stair. And then also the hallways that are adjacent to the stairs. So we're trying to improve the egress and code compliantness of it.
What about the floors and the structure?
So we're still investigating that and working with the contractor. I believe the contractor had concerns about the levelness of the floors and trying to make them more level. But I think if we can, make that a non-issue, I don't think that we have, I don't think we're opposed to necessarily salvaging the existing floor structure.
Are there severe issues with warping of the floors or deterioration that are causing sloping? Because I didn't see that in the presentation.
Yeah, I think there are concerns with sloping.
Other than just an old building settling over 100 years.
Yeah, so with introducing the basement, there are concerns of how that will impact the existing floor structure. We will be bringing a structural engineer on board on the design of the new project. And as we we're currently in the schematic phase, so as we get further into it, we would be able to provide more information on that. I guess the
As well
preference
as
would be to maintain the existing floors or floor structure.
the preference is to maintain as much original fabric inside and out as possible, because it's compatible in a historic building that building that contributes to the historic district. And the structural engineer you'll bring on will also help you with the underpinning requirements, protection for the adjacent buildings as well.
Yes, definitely. I did have one question, or I just wanted to bring up one thing, if we could go back, about the rear alley view. And how this site is more visible from the intersection of the alley streets, whereas looking at my site plan, the property at 10 3rd Street, which is also fairly visible from that intersection, has a 3-story brick building completely obscuring the rear historic building. So that's another example of modifications on the site. It was that we were also studying when we looked at the site.
Sorry, 10 3rd Street is also not part of a unit of 3 buildings that have all similar mansard roofs. So I would say that that's a difference between your project, but I'm sure staff could explain that more in detail to you, and would be glad to discuss your design ideas as you present them, as how you might maintain your mansard.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? What I would propose then is that we, unless others have thoughts, we, yes, defer this and have the applicant come back to us with a solution that incorporates the maintaining, retention of the mansard roof and more of the existing structure, the building, so that there's significantly less demo, and yeah, then we can weigh in on the project in its totality. Sounds like you're agreeing with that, Gretchen.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I was going to ask you if you would consider that, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Oh, it helps the applicant too, because then they don't have to pay, separate fee and all that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time? Paying what fee?
No, by deferring, you're continuing your case. You don't have to open up a new case, because if we, I think that what the chair is saying is that by us offering you an opportunity to continue your case, to explore opportunities to retain the rear mansard and do minimize the amount of demolition even farther, significantly farther than you have it right now in the plans. It'll give you an opportunity to just come back on as a hearing case. You don't have to reapply as a reconsideration or a new case, which would have fees associated with it. So
I see.
We're trying to help you out that way.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll conclude this for the day and look forward to it coming back.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks. We're ready for our last case in the Cleveland Park Historic District at 3601 35th Street Northwest.
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Todd Jones with HPO staff. The property is 3601 35th Street Northwest. The concept is for enclosing a one-story open side porch on a 1915 kit house. The house is located at the corner of 35th Street and Porter Street. The side porch is on the Porter Street side of the house and so is visible from that street. I've included some images here to show the larger context. The street view image at the bottom is looking down Porter Street with 35th Street crossing in front. The house is on the corner and the porch is marked by the yellow arrow. The aerial view in the upper right corner is pivoted 90 degrees. The house and porch are again marked by a yellow arrow with Porter Street running along the bottom of that image. Please note that both of these images date to 2009 because there was less tree cover and it made visibility easier. Neither image shows the 2015 edition that was made on the opposite side of the house, which would be at the far left on the street view image. The plans you'll see today call for the side porch to be filled in with mostly windows to preserve a porch-like feeling, as seen in the image in the upper left corner. The existing trellis roof will be retained and existing wood columns will be replaced in kind. The walls of the enclosed porch will be inset to allow the columns to remain prominent. Staff believes the plans are compatible and follow examples set by other side porches that have been enclosed. I'd like to take a brief moment to address a point that was raised in the report of the Cleveland Park Historical Society. That report suggested that since this side porch is located so close to Porter Street, it should be reviewed as if it were a front porch on Porter Street instead of a side porch. You can see the context in the images here. The aerial view in particular shows the side porch's relationship to the front porches on Porter. The worry is that this case could set a precedent for enclosing front porches on Porter Street and disrupt the current rhythm. I want to stress that HPO staff does not consider this side porch to be a de facto front porch, and if the board was to approve this concept, that approval will not set a precedent for enclosing front porches. This side porch differs greatly from front porches on Porter. 100% of the open front porches on Porter Street share 3 of the same features, which are a well-defined front entryway, a staircase, and a walkway that physically and visually connects the porch to the street. The concept to enclose this side porch has none of those characteristics. No exterior door, no walkway, no stair, and no connection to Porter. And the house already has an obvious and well-defined front entryway on 35th Street. As you can see, the house has a very traditional form. Houses like this with a 2-story, 3-bay central massing and a 1-story side appendage are extremely common in the historic district. On some of those houses, the side appendage is in the form of an open porch. For many, it's instead a sunroom or an enclosed porch, like on the house directly across the street in the street view image seen here. Sometimes a side appendage can also be a garage. So because of that common design language, as well as the context of the street layout itself, and the lack of typical front porch features, the side porch here should never be confused for being a front porch, whether it's open or closed. Enclosing the side appendage of such buildings is common. An example situated on a corner and previously approved by the board was provided in the staff report. So in summary, HPO recommends the board find the project compatible with the Cleveland Park Historic District and delegate authority to staff. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to the applicant for more details.
Hi, thank you. My name is Austin Paris, and I will be presenting for Lisa and Leroy today. As we go through this presentation, you'll be seeing a bunch of photos from site, as well as different angles and viewpoints like Todd had pointed out. If you go to slide 2, you will see how it looks now. These photos were taken September 2024. There's been quite a bit of growth on all of the bushes and trees between all of the properties, as well as that outline the property. In particular, image number 4 shows this from inside of the corner lot. Image number 5 shows from the porch towards Porter Street, towards those neighbors' front porch. And view 6 is from the back of the property, looking towards the side porch, which would be the neighbor's view without any trees in the way. And then you can see a view from across the street. And if you could go to the next slide, you will see an existing photo of what the porch is and our proposed image on the right. We are proposing that the work is just enclosing the side porch, using as little of the square footage as possible to make the columns remain as prominent as possible. They are meant to be replaced in kind with turned wood posts. We would replace the roof likely with a TPO roof. The space is in a state of disrepair as is without the enclosure. So they just have some damage that needs to be fixed anyways. And the trellis roof would remain. And if you could go to the next slide, please. This is a view showing the front of the home with that inside enclosed side porch, maintaining the natural views and adding additional character to the home. These updates, I believe, blend seamlessly with the addition that was done in 2010 on the left, as well as the existing kit home. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. The next couple of slides are some images of what that might look like in the future. This is, we did work with closely with ANC, ARC, and HBO through this design process to determine what kind of windows and shape of windows to use. And this is what was recommended at the end. Then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that image a bit closer up from the back and what that might look like. The intention is to leave it as open as possible with as much viewing area as possible as to not obstruct any of the openness that exists currently. If you could go to the next slide, you will see just the interior elevations of that space, meaning showing that we are trying to use as much open wall space as possible. In elevation 2, what you can't see is the column in the center between those windows, but those windows are as large as they can be width-wise and as large as they can be height-wise to support the weight and also the structure for the new windows. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a floor plan showing what the existing platform looks like and our proposed window layout, as well as walls. As you can see, there are very few walls, very few. The intention here is to leave the space, like I said, as open as possible and keep those columns as prominent as possible. If you go to the next slide, please. Is that the last one? Might be. Oh, okay. And then we included some specs on what those windows would look like and what size those windows would be. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you. Any questions from board members? Great. I know we do have one neighbor who is registered to speak, so I think at this time we'll hear from Jane Gilbert.
Yes, I'm here. Let me try to start a video if I can.
You can't start a video. You just need to speak.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon. I am Jane Gilbert. My family and I have lived on Porter Street next door to the house under discussion since 1978. The house under discussion, 3601 35th Street, which I'll refer to here as 3601, excuse me, is a corner house facing both 35th and Porter, as you've heard. And I don't want to hide the proposal under, I do not want to hide the fact that the proposal under discussion will definitely negatively affect our house and our lifestyle. But more than this, I am concerned that, number one, this project will eliminate a historic feature of what HPO has referred to as a, quote, prominent corner of the historic district. And two, that despite HPO's contentions and hopes, this will be a precedent-setting decision. Let me expand. The open porch at the corner of 35th and Porter is a lovely feature of our neighborhood, lending it a unique and historic character. In the midst of a busy street, it's a gentle reminder of a time when life was a bit quieter. Despite landscaping, the porch is pleasantly visible. More importantly, permitting enclosure of this porch is likely to establish a precedent permitting enclosure of front porches in historic neighborhoods. And this could have widespread ramifications, not just in our own neighborhood. There seems to be disagreement about whether this porch is a front or a side porch. Facing 35th Street, it's a side porch, but it is also integral to the alignment of front porches on Porter Street. Its depth, size, and style make it indistinguishable from Porter Street porches. ARC says, quote, the porch is in line with the other porches along the north side of Porter Street and becomes part of the rhythm of aligned porches along the street, a character-defining feature. ARC also says what is a side porch on 35th becomes a front porch on Porter. While ARC reads 3601 as a front porch, HPO, as you've heard, reads it as a side porch. However, the similarity of features between the 3601 porch and the others on Porter, as well as the perfect alignment of structures, challenges this contention. The photo I have submitted of my children, now adults, on our porch shows the proximity, alignment, and similarity of the 3601 porch with our own porch. Note the railings as one such feature. Also note the openness of the porch. No matter how much an enclosure tries to read like a porch, it will not be a porch. In discussing this proposal, HPO refers to another porch on Highland Place, as you've already heard. However, this comparison falls short. The side porch of the Highland Place house is in no way aligned with, related to, or visible from the Newark Street porch. I have provided 2 photos in my written testimony which demonstrate this. In contrast to the Highland Place house, the 3601 porch lines up perfectly with the Porter Street porches and is essentially indistinguishable. Again, I am concerned about this project because it will eliminate a lovely historic feature of our quote-unquote prominent corner. Also, despite HPO's thoughts, I fear that permission to enclose the porch will be used as a precedent for future porch enclosures. Because of the above, I hope that you will render an opinion in favor of maintaining structures that contribute to the historic character of Cleveland Park. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate in this process. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Gilbert?
I do, Ms. Gilbert. Could you just clarify for me how enclosing this porch is not compatible with the historic district?
I think the main way
In your
is that
opinion.
we have a continuous line of open porches on Porter Street, and that line has been maintained. My neighbor on the other side many years ago applied for a porch enclosure to his definitely front porch. And they were told that it would interfere with the continuous line of porches, and that line of porches was a historic feature, a defining feature. The porch at 3601 35th Street is the last one in the long line. Well, it's not a long line, it's, half a dozen or so houses. But it's the last one in that row of porches. So it would interfere with the line that exists now. It would also, the line of porches, what it does for people living here is it provides a certain open quality and character to the street. Okay, so I can usually see through their porch to a redbud tree which blooms on 35th Street. I can see 2 houses down on the other side to what's going on my other neighbor's porch. So there's an open feeling which has been characteristic of this line of porches.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your testimony. Would the applicant like to respond?
Yes, I just wanted to say that we have received several letters of support from additional neighbors. I believe one of them is in the HPO folder, but during ANC and the ANC process, which we've gone through several months of different renditions of this to make it as as open as possible in order to do this project. And we have additional letters of support from neighbors in the ANC. We believe that we have complied with everything that Historic has asked of us and that HPO has asked of us in general. And we have done our best to, appease what Jane would also like, which is an open porch, which I realize this is not her best solution. However, this is the best solution that meets all parties' best interests.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions from the board for the applicant? Great. Then I'll ask that board members turn on your cameras so we can deliberate. And I'll just start by saying I'm in support of the staff report. I mean, this proposal maintains the side porch. To me, although it's visible, in line with the front porches, it's not an entry. as a front porch is. And the addition of glazing within the column bays seems like a minimal modification to what has remained as largely the same look of the existing side porch. So I'm in support of this concept. Others?
I concur and
have-
would second
I
a
don't have anything to
nomination,
Okay.
resolution to support the staff report.
Okay.
I have nothing to add.
So I'll officially make that motion. Thank you, Andrew, to support the staff report. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in support say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, then the motion carries. Thank you all, and that is it for today. And we don't have a continuation hearing this month, so we will be back in December. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.